You know, some people think family means you're obligated to take whatever they dish out. That blood is thicker than water and all that. Well, let me tell you about the day I learned that sometimes the family you choose treats you better than the one you raised with your own two hands. My name is Darlene. I'm 60 minus 7 years old, and I've spent most of my life working harder than most people can imagine. I raised my son Travis completely on my own after his father decided to pack a bag and disappear when the boy was just 5 years old. No money, no explanation. Just gone. I worked 3 jobs at a time to keep us afloat. I cleaned houses during the day, worked the night shift at a diner, and helped elderly couples with their errands on weekends. Every single penny I made went to rent, bills, and Travis's school clothes. I was so proud when he became the first person in our family to go to college. I even sold my grandmother's ring to help pay for his textbooks one semester. That ring had been in our family for generations, but I figured my son's future was worth more than any piece of jewelry. That's where he met Candace. She came from old money, the kind where her father owned a chain of car dealerships and her mother wore pearls to the grocery store. From the very first time I met her, I could tell she looked down on me. She'd smile when I visited, but it was that fake, practiced smile I'd seen 1,000 times working for wealthy families. The kind that says, "Thanks for coming, now please leave." They got married right after college and had 2 beautiful children, Olivia and Mason. When I turned 60-5, my arthritis started getting worse, and I was struggling to keep up with the physical demands of my jobs. The rent on my one-bedroom apartment kept going up, and I was barely making ends meet. That's when Ravis made me an offer that seemed like a blessing at the time. He said, "Mom, why don't you come stay with us? We've got plenty of space, and honestly, we could really use help with the kids." I asked if he was sure, told him I didn't want to be a burden. He looked me right in the eye and said, "You're not a burden, you're family." Their house was everything I'd never had growing up. For bedrooms, brand new appliances, those fancy light switches that dim when you touch them. I stayed in the guest room downstairs, and Candace showed me how to use the washing machine settings, but made it crystal clear which items were hers and what I wasn't allowed to touch. The arrangement was simple enough. I helped with the kids minus Olivia was 5 and Mason was barely 2. I made breakfast every morning, packed their lunches, handled all the daycare drop-offs and pickups, folded their laundry, kept the kitchen spotless, and did most of the cooking when Travis and Candace got home late from work. Meanwhile, Candace spent her days at Pilates classes, been having lunch dates with other wealthy mothers. Travis worked long hours, and when he came home, he barely looked up from his phone. But I didn't complain. I was just grateful to be around my grandchildren, to be part of their daily lives. Then I got sick, and everything changed overnight. It started with what I thought was just a headache and some chills. I figured it was a simple flu bug, so I kept pushing through. I still got up at 6 every morning to make oatmeal for the kids, still folded towels even though my hands were shaking so badly I could barely grip them. After 4 days of getting progressively worse, I couldn't keep anything down. I finally dragged myself to urgent care where the doctor took one look at me and diagnosed pneumonia. He prescribed antibiotics and told me in no uncertain terms that I needed to stay in bed for at least 5 days to recover properly. When I came home that evening and explained to Candace what the doctor had said, she looked at me like I'd just told her I'd broken her favorite piece of china. "Well, what are we supposed to do now?" she said, crossing her arms and giving me that look I'd learned to recognize. I tried to reassure her, saying I'd still help as much as I could, just maybe not quite as much for a few days while I recovered. That's when she said the words that cut through me like ice water down my spine, "Darlene, we're not running a charity here." That night, when Ravis came home from work, I waited until the children were safely asleep before bringing up the situation gently. I explained that I was trying my best and just needed a little time to get better. He wouldn't even look me in the eye. He just said, "Maybe it's time we looked into a nursing home. Just temporarily, of course. You need proper care, right? Proper care." That's what they called getting rid of me when I became inconvenient. I didn't argue with them. I didn't beg or plead or make a scene. I just nodded quietly and went to my room. At 2 in the morning, while the house was completely silent, I packed a small bag with my medications, a change of clothes, and one treasured photograph of Travis from his high school graduation. He was smiling so big in that picture, holding up the diploma I'd worked 3 jobs to help him earn. I left that house without saying a word to anyone. I called an old friend I hadn't spoken to in years, a woman named Joyce who used to work with me at the diner off Route 33rd. She still lived in Harrisburger, and when I explained my situation, she immediately told me to come stay with her. She even drove halfway to meet me, which was more kindness than I'd received from my own family. I spent the next few weeks healing on Joyce's couch. She made homemade chicken soup, let me rest as much as I needed, and most importantly, she treated me like a human being who deserved basic compassion. Travis never called to check on me. Candace didn't send a single text. They didn't even seem to care whether I was alive or dead. But here's the thing about being underestimated your whole life minus people tend to forget that you might be smarter than they give you credit for. Years ago, back when I was still living in Roanoke, I used to clean house for a retired lawyer named Walter Stein. He was a kind, quiet man who never treated me like hired help. One day, while I was dusting his extensive bookcase, he asked me if I had a will. I actually laughed and said, "What's there to leave?" He looked at me thoughtfully and said, "You've got more than you think." Walter helped me put together a simple living trust. I never thought I'd actually need to use it, but I had forgotten about one asset that had been sitting there all along. My grandparents had left me 5 acres of land in Amherst County. For decades, I'd assumed it was worthless, just some old family property that nobody wanted. But last year, a development company had bought up all the surrounding lots, and when Walter looked into it, he discovered that my little patch of land was now worth over $800,000. And it was in my name minus not Travis's, not Candace's. Mine. That's when I made a decision that would change everything. Walter helped me restructure the trust so that every single dollar from that land sale would go into an account specifically for my grandchildren, Olivia and Mason. Not one penny would go to Travis or Candace. The trust would be completely locked until the kids turned 20-5, and if either parent tried to contest it or interfere with it in any way, they would lose access to it completely. Walter made sure it was absolutely ironclad. Then, at my request, Walter paid a personal visit to their house in Ashburn. Candace answered the door with Travis standing behind her. Walter introduced himself politely, handed them a folder, and said, "Your mother's financial matters have been finalized. You'll find that you've been removed from all access to her assets. The trust belongs to your children now." Candace asked why I would do such a thing. Walter looked her straight in the eye and said, "Because when she needed you most, you treated her like trash." Travis started calling that very night, leaving voicemails saying there must have been some kind of misunderstanding. Then came the text messages, "Just can we talk? The kids miss you. Candace is sorry. Don't do this to us." I didn't reply to any of them. Instead, I sent one photograph minus me standing next to Walter, holding the trust paperwork. On the back, I wrote, "You had a mother. You chose convenience over compassion. This is what that choice costs." A week after I mailed them that photo, Travis showed up at Joyce's front door. I was in the kitchen washing dishes when I heard his voice, timid and uncertain, asking for me. My heart stopped for a moment, but I dried my hands and walked slowly to the living room. There he was, standing in the doorway, looking less like the successful man in expensive suits and more like a 17-year-old boy who'd just been caught doing something terrible. "Mom," he said quietly, "can we talk?" We sat on Joyce's couch in complete silence for what felt like an eternity. He stared down at the floor while I waited. I wasn't about to make this conversation easy for him. Finally, he said, "I didn't know what Candace said to you." "She never told me about the charity comment." I raised an eyebrow at him. "You were standing right there when you suggested I needed to look into nursing homes." He tried to backtrack quickly. "I didn't mean it like that. I was stressed. The kids had been sick, work was crazy. I didn't handle the situation right. I didn't say anything. I just sat there and watched him squirm, waiting to see what he'd say next. Then he revealed the real reason he'd come. Is it really locked, the trust? There it was. Not 'Are you okay?' Not 'I miss you.' Not even 'I'm sorry.' He was there because of the money. Every penny, I told him calmly. You're completely cut out. And if you or Candace try to challenge it, the kids lose everything too." He looked like he might cry, but no tears actually came. Then he said something that made my stomach turn. "Candace is talking to a lawyer. She says it's elder manipulation." I stood up immediately. "You mean to tell me that she didn't care when I was sick in her house, but now she's suddenly worried that I've been manipulated because she's not getting a payday?" He tried to backtrack, saying he told her not to pursue it, but I held up my hand to stop him. "Not if you came here to make things right. Then go home and stop her. If either of you file so much as a single form, the kids lose everything. That land was mine, that trust is theirs, and that's the only chance they have at escaping the two of you." He didn't argue. He just stood there with his mouth slightly open, then turned around and walked out. 3 days later, I got a call from Olivia's elementary school. They told me that Candace had missed the pickups in one weekend, that her emergency contacts weren't working. Little Olivia was scared and had asked specifically if Grandma Darlene could come get her. I wasn't officially listed on any contact forms, but the school counselor remembered me well. I had been the one dropping Olivia off every single morning, baking cookies for the teacher's lounge, bringing snow boots when Candace forgot them. They said they couldn't release Olivia to me without written permission, which I completely understood. But the counselor quietly let me know that something wasn't right at home. I didn't want to drag Joyce into this mess, so I took the bus to Ashburn the next morning and sat in a cafe across from the school. I waited until the final bell rang and watched Candace pull up 20-2 minutes late in her Mercedes SUV, sunglasses on, phone in one hand. When Olivia came out, she looked exhausted. Her hair wasn't brushed properly, she was wearing mismatched socks, and she had none of the brightness I remembered. This was a little girl who used to walk out of the house with perfect braids, colorful ribbons, and a huge smile. That day, she didn't even look up from the ground. Later that evening, I received a message from someone I never expected to hear from, minus Candace's sister Melanie. We'd never had much of a relationship, but she'd been at the wedding and had brought cupcakes to Mason's second birthday party. Her message said, "I don't agree with what Candace did to you. You were genuinely good to those kids, and she's completely in over her head now. Travis told her about the trust, and she's spiraling. She told me she's going to file a motion to contest it. I just thought you should know, minus she's not thinking clearly right now." Then Melanie sent another message that revealed the full scope of the situation. Candace's credit cards are all maxed out. She stopped making mortgage payments months ago. She was counting on getting money from your land sale. She keeps saying you owed it to them. That's what she tells everyone. I didn't reply to Melanie, but I immediately forwarded both messages to Walter. 3 days later, he filed a protective clause in court and added an amendment trust that would prevent any legal harassment. If either parent tried to challenge the trust, a separate clause would automatically trigger, and a third minus party guardian would be appointed to manage the children's inheritance independently. They didn't know it yet, but I was prepared to be that guardian if necessary. I wasn't playing games anymore. I had given everything I had to that family, minus raised a boy completely alone, supported him through college, even paid for his wedding cake when Candace's parents backed out at the last minute. I had babysat their children for free for an entire year, and the one time I needed basic human compassion, they treated me like a stray dog begging for scraps. Now they were about to learn what it really meant to lose something important. Because love isn't free, and neither is betrayal. It didn't take long for the next chapter to unfold. Walter called me 2 weeks after we filed the protective clause, and I could hear that familiar warning tone in his voice. "Darlene," he said, "they filed the motion." I didn't speak, just waited for him to continue. "Candace filed a petition through a separate attorney. She's claiming you were of sound mind when we created the trust, and she's asking the court to freeze everything and assign an investigator." "Let them investigate," I said calmly. "We have everything properly documented." But Walter paused in a way that made my stomach drop. "That's not the worst part," he said. "She's also claiming elder abuse. Against me and against Joyce." I sat back in my kitchen chair, staring at the wall in disbelief. This woman, who had kicked me out of her house while I was sick with pneumonia, was now telling the courts that I was a confused old woman being manipulated by the very people who had shown me genuine kindness. "She's smart," Walter admitted. "She's not going to win, but she's going to try to deceive mind along the way." That's when I made a decision that would change everything. I wasn't just going to defend the trust, minus I was going to show the court exactly what kind of mother and grandmother Candace really was. I started making phone calls and gathering evidence. The daycare where I used to pick up Mason every single day still remembered me. One of the staff members agreed to sign a statement confirming that I had been handling his pickup almost daily for nearly a year. The elementary school counselor who had worked with Olivia remembered me too. She told me off the record that Olivia had once asked if I could come to Real Mom's Day at school because Mommy never comes to anything. I tracked down neighbors from their subdivision in Ashburn, the ones who had seen me mowing their lawn or walking Mason in his stroller on countless occasions. One of them wrote a detailed letter about how many times he had witnessed Candace screaming on the front porch with a glass of wine in her hand, while I quietly shepherded the children inside to calm them down. But I didn't stop there. Walter helped me submit a request to the court for Candace's complete financial disclosures. Since she had directly linked her motives to the trust's value, we had every legal right to examine her financial situation. What came back was worse than I had expected. Over $60 minus $5,000 in credit card debt to missed mortgage payments, and a home equity loan that had been quietly taken out 6 months before I even moved in with them. But the most damaging evidence was found in her private Venmo account. There were regular transfers labeled relief, stress meds, and one that simply said babysitting minus finally a break. That particular payment had been sent during the exact week I had pneumonia, was still struggling to change Mason's diapers with my shaking hands. The person she had paid was a 20-8- old man named Bryce who had no childcare license, no experience with children, but plenty of social media photos with Candace at various bars while Travis was at work. When I showed everything to Walter, he nodded slowly and said, "This completely changes the game." We filed our own counter-minus motion. Not only would we defend the trust, but we were going to request limited custody oversight of the grandchildren if it could be proven that Candace was neglecting them. The goal wasn't to take them away completely, minus I didn't want that kind of disruption in their lives. But I wanted enough legal oversight to ensure they were safe and that Candace couldn't use them as bargaining chips for money. I didn't tell Travis about any of this. I didn't warn him what was coming. I wanted to see exactly where he would stand when everything came out in court. But sometimes fate has its own timeline. Just 2 days before the scheduled hearing, Melanie messaged him again. She said she had been staying at the house to help with the children because Candace had been off minus drinking in the mornings, screaming at Olivia over minor things, and Mason had developed a noticeable stutter. She hadn't wanted to believe it was that serious, but now she was genuinely scared. Then she told me something that made me stop reading and minus read times last night. I caught Candace on the phone trying to convince Olivia to say that you used to yell at her. She was actually rehearsing lines with a 5-year-old. When I told her to stop, she told me to leave and never come back. My hands were shaking as I forwarded the message to Walter. He said it was the final nail in Candace's coffin. But the night before the hearing, someone knocked on Joyce's door. It was Travis, but he wasn't alone, minus he had Olivia with him. "Can we come in?" When we sat down, Olivia immediately came over and sat next to me on the couch, clutching my hand tightly. "She didn't pack for me," Olivia said softly. "Daddy did." Travis cleared his throat and looked directly at me. "Candace's lawyer dropped her case today. Said she had been hiding too many things from him. Melanie told me everything about what's been happening. When I confronted Candace about it, she said that if I didn't back her up in court, she would tell the judge I was abusing her too." He paused, his eyes bloodshot with exhaustion. "I should have said something sooner, Mom. I should have stopped her the moment she said we weren't running a charity. I was scared of what she might do if I stood up to her, but I finally made my choice." He pulled a folded document out of his coat pocket. "I signed full power of attorney for the kids' share of the trust over to you. And I submitted a written statement to the court supporting you, the trust, and everything you've done." Then he did something I never thought I would see again. My grown son got down on his knees in front of me and started crying. "I'm sorry, Mom. I was a coward, and I lost everything because of it." I didn't know what to say, so I just put my hand on his shoulder while Olivia leaned her head against my lap. The courtroom was packed on the day of the hearing. Candace showed up wearing a dark blazer, trying to look respectable, but her hair was a mess and she kept fidgeting nervously. Her new lawyer looked uncomfortable and kept shuffling through his papers. Walter, on the other hand, was calm as ever, methodically flipping through his files with his reading glasses low in his nose. I sat beside him wearing the same blue dress I'd worn to Travis's college graduation. It still fit perfectly. Travis sat on the other side of the courtroom aisle, with Olivia beside him holding a small stuffed bunny. Mason was staying with Melanie, who had agreed to testify if needed. I saw Candace glance over at Travis, clearly expecting him to come sit with her. He didn't move. When the judge entered, the entire room fell silent. What followed felt like it lasted for hours. Candace's lawyer started with a dramatic opening statement about elder abuse and undue influence. They claimed I had been tricked into changing my trust, that Walter had taken advantage of me, and that Joyce had deliberately isolated me from my family. It was all carefully written legal language, cold and calculated. Then Walter stood up and methodically presented our evidence. He showed my medical records proving I was mentally stable and fully capable of making my own decisions. He presented video statements from people at the school and daycare, signed witness letters from neighbors, and documented proof of my consistent involvement in the children's lives. He displayed the financial records showing Candace's debt and irresponsible spending. He showed the Venmo transfers to Bryson, the social media photos of them together at bars. Then Walter played an audio recording that made the entire courtroom go silent. It was Olivia's voice, quiet but crystal clear. Mommy told me to say Grandma yelled at me, but that's not true. Grandma never yells at anyone. Mommy got really mad when I said no. She told me she would take away all my toys if I didn't practice saying it right. Candace's face went completely white. She tried to stand up. Walter then handed to Judge Melanie's written statement about witnessing the coaching session. Finally, Travis was called to testify. He walked slowly to the front of the courtroom, looked at me, then at Candace, and began to speak. I was weak, he said. My mother raised me completely alone. She sacrificed everything she had for me, and I let my wife treat her like she was a problem to be managed instead of a person who deserved respect. I stood there and suggested maybe it was time for a nursing home when she got sick. I'll never forgive myself for that moment of cowardice. He paused, gathering his composure. My mother didn't change this trust to punish us. She changed it to protect the only people in this entire situation who are truly innocent, minus my children. The judge sat back and remained silent for a long time after that. He didn't speak for what felt like an eternity. Finally, he looked directly at Candace. What I see here, he said, is a woman who abandoned her mother minus law when she fell ill, then attempted to manipulate her own child into lying in court, then lied to her husband, to her sister, and to this court. He looked at Candace's lawyer. You were dismissed from this case immediately. This filing was completely baseless and potentially fraudulent. Then he turned to Walter. The trust stands exactly as written. The protective clause remains in full effect. Finally, he looked at me. Ms. Darlene, do you wish to proceed with your petition for partial guardianship and oversight of your grandchildren's trust? I glanced over at Olivia, who gave me a small, encouraging smile. Yes, Your Honor, I said. Granted, the judge replied firmly. Then he addressed Travis. You have voluntarily relinquished all financial rights to this trust? Yes, Your Honor. The gavel fell with a sound that seemed to echo through the entire room. It was finished. After court, Candace tried to approach Travis outside the building, but he walked right past her without acknowledging her presence. Olivia tugged on his hand and said, I want to go to Grandma's house now. Candace was left standing alone on the courthouse steps. Within a month, she had moved out of the house in Ashburn. The bank foreclosed on it shortly after. As for Bryce, it turned out he had been seen to other women the entire time. One of them actually posted screenshots of him calling Candace only cougar with serious cash problems. Candace tried to sue him for emotional distress, but it went nowhere. She now lives in a small apartment in Fredericksburg, working part-minus time as a real estate assistant. From what I've heard, she spends more time drinking than working. Her name has been permanently blocked from the trust records, and she's not allowed any contact with the children unless it's supervised by the court. Travis moved into a modest townhouse in Leesburg and was granted full custody of both children. I see Olivia and Mason 3 times a week now. We have pancake Sundays, I help with homework, and I taught Mason how to tie his shoes properly. His stutter is completely gone now. As for me, I stayed in Harrisburg and bought a small house with some of the money from selling what remained of my old property after the trust was established. I didn't keep much for myself, but it's enough to live comfortably without worry. One afternoon, I received a letter in the mail that made me sit down and cry. It was from Olivia, written in her careful 5-year-old handwriting. Dear Grandma, I remember everything. You never yelled at us. You were always there when we needed you. Mommy told me to lie about you, but I didn't want to because it wasn't true. I hope you're proud of me. I'm really proud of you. I want to be just like you when I grow up. Love, Olivia. I sat on my front porch with that letter for a very long time, thinking about everything that had happened. Some people think revenge means shouting and slamming doors and dramatically throwing people out of your life. But real revenge, it's quiet. It's legal. It's permanent. They turned their backs on me when I needed them most, and now they have to live with the consequences of that choice every single day. And me? I live in peace, surrounded by the people who actually matter, minus my grandchildren, who will never have to worry about their future because their grandmother was smart enough to protect what was theirs. Sometimes the best revenge is simply being wise enough to plan ahead.